My name is Helen Beale. I'm Head of Sales and Marketing here at Midvision, and today I'm accompanied by our CTO, Richard Bettison.
Hi everybody.
We've got about an hour-long session today. We're going to be starting doing some positioning, so we'll talk a little bit about why people do deployment automation in the first place, and then Richard will position the RapidDeploy architecture and talk you through what the WebLogic plugin itself does before moving on to a live demonstration of the plugin. So first of all, why do people buy deployment automation tools? Well, what we see in the market is a maturity scale. So Gartner said a couple of years ago that it was an emerging market with approximately 3% take-up, and they expected to see 25% take-up of automation tools by about 2016. So we see a maturity scale where at the bottom people are doing all of their deployments manually, so that's the most basic approach. And then the next step up, people are starting to do a few scripts, so they kind of sat down and realized they could do something a bit faster, and then they build more and more scripts until they've got a massive script monster. And at that point, people start thinking about maybe building some tooling around their huge pile of scripts, and they might perhaps do some integrations into a tool chain or start building a graphical user interface and maybe some security around that. And then at the top end of the maturity scale, we see a vendor-managed tool like ours, and of course we would say that, but the reasons for that, we have lots and lots of customers spread around globally, and we actively elicit requirements from all of our customers into our product development roadmap. So we're constantly innovating the tool, we have lots and lots of inputs into it, and it's the only thing we do. So we're a niche vendor, very, very focused on this specific area. So what's the problem with the script approach? Well, there's a number of problems. It's very time-consuming. Obviously not quite as time-consuming as a manual approach, but it can be very time-consuming. Also goes wrong very often, so there's a lot of troubleshooting overheads that happen. So when people are looking at automation tooling to support their processes in this space, they're primarily looking initially for productivity improvements. They're also looking for reduction in effort. Some business cases are built around removing resources, but lots of business cases are about releasing those resources to do more interesting things, or a lot of customers know that they're going to have more demand from the business to deliver an increased amount of applications, but they're going to have to do that with the same amount of resources. We have other customers, particularly in the finance and healthcare industry, who are particularly interested in compliance. So even though they know they can do certain projects with maybe the scripts that they've already got, they know that they won't have a record of everything that's happened if they use those scripts. We have one bank in particular who recently had an incident with one of the auditors where the auditor wanted to know what their environments looked like several years ago, and they were able to go back into the tool and spin up that environment exactly as it had looked several years before. So really we're talking about reducing costs, reducing time, reducing risk when we're talking about deployment automation tools. And you can see here, and this is from a Hurwitz report a couple of years ago, this is from a survey with real-life people that had implemented these type of solutions. You can see the kind of benefits and the average improvement that people are seeing from implementing these type of solutions. And we use these slides a lot with our customers when we're building business cases. So if you want hands building your return on investment calculations, your environment or your business case, let us know. We have a lot of material to support you in that effort. And here again, you can see people's drivers to automate the deployment process. And one of the things that we've noted as well over the years with our customers is we very rarely see a standalone automation project. They're normally linked to something else. So whether a customer is building a private cloud or a PaaS, they may be doing a middleware upgrade, they may be upgrading a critical business application. There's normally something that drives the requirement for the automation piece itself. So they know that they can do that specific project faster, and they know that their life is going to be easier to maintain all their environments once that has been implemented. And this is what we see with these platforms as well. So often somebody might begin by buying the tool just to do a JBoss deployment, for instance, and then they'll realize that actually they've got lots of WebLogic or MQ or Message Broker, and the tool gets deployed across the whole enterprise. So I'm now going to pass over to Richard, who's going to talk you through the RapidDeploy architecture.
Hello again, everybody. So RapidDeploy is it's a web application fundamentally based on Java. So it will run in Java containers like Tomcat and WebSphere. It's comprised of three main components, and they are the framework server, which is the web application, the transport layer, which transports the various artifacts, log files, and so on between the framework server and the satellite target servers. And then there is the orchestration framework, which runs on the target servers, which actually does all the work. So, installs WebLogic binaries, deploys gear files to them, deploys configuration, takes snapshots, all of that kind of thing. So within that core automation framework, we have a number of plugins. So the architecture of RapidDeploy is entirely plugin based. The core framework really just marshals and orchestrates those plugins to work together. And so you can see in this slide that there are a number of different types of plugins. There are target plugins, and these are plugins specific to particular target products. So, for example, there is a WebLogic plugin, there are WebSphere plugins, Message Broker, JBoss, so on. And that plugin contains all of the information required to use and deploy those components. And that might include screens for the UI to be filled in. It might include deployment tasks that actually run on the target servers, and potentially any other configuration or resources that might be required. For example, templates to make life easy for you. Then we have transport plugins. These are the plugins, as the name suggests, that enable you to communicate between the framework server and the target nodes. There are two of those we use mostly at the moment, and they are basically an SSH transport, which allows you to use SSH to communicate with the targets. And then there is a remoting agent transport, which allows you to use an agent on the targets. You can also, in fact, use the SSH plugin to deploy the agent plugin and then use the agent. SSH is obviously an industry standard, secure way of communicating with target servers, but usually that's limited to Linux and Unix. So you might want to think about using the agent, certainly for Windows, although a lot of people do also use the agent for Linux as well. The agent is also secured, so you can use it out of the box, SSL enabled. It has full security, so that you can give the agents passwords that are only known by the RapidDeploy server, and it's secure for all of the communication that you do. Then we have a number of cloud plugins, and an example of that might be the AWS plugin. So you can use the cloud plugins to spin up some AWS instances if you wish to prior to doing your deployments. And then we have toolchain plugins. These pretty much, not entirely, live within the core automation framework in that they're not typically deployed out to the target servers. So those toolchain plugins typically fall into the areas of build plugins. So we have plugins for things like Hudson, Jenkins, Cruise Control, Anthill Pro, etc., that enables you to call out to build engines. We also, for instance, for Jenkins, have an actual Jenkins plugin to RapidDeploy. So you can use Jenkins as part of your build. So as a post-build step, you can make a call out to RapidDeploy to actually deploy the built package out to one or more target servers, thus allowing you to use it in a continuous integration and then continuous delivery way. So other plugins would be things like SCM plugins. So RapidDeploy can store all of its artifacts. So for example, configurations of target environments, etc., in SCM tools, and these would be tools such as Subversion, Git, ClearCase, etc., etc. Other toolchain plugins would be artifact plugins. So when you've built some artifact that you want to deploy, now you might be familiar with using Maven to, for example, store your jar files that you build. Well, we use the same approach for the built package that can be deployed. We have the idea of a versioned package that contains all of the artifacts that can be deployed to all target environments, and that will encompass things like EAR files and WAR files, jar files, configuration, scripts, .NET components, anything that you would want to deploy for a project can go into a versioned archive, and that needs to be stored somewhere, and so we have archive plugins. And those can range from, for example, a flat file system, so you can just store them on a file system on the RapidDeploy server, or you can use a remote plugin that we have that allows you to store them remotely in a repository via SCP, and then that will then range up to things like Maven, so you can store them in a remote Maven repository, or Nexus, or Artifactory, etc. And then we have business intelligence plugins, and these entirely live within the core automation framework. They're not deployed out. And these are things like our reporting plugin. So we have a plugin for Jasper Reports that enables you to customize and build your own reports against the RapidDeploy database. RapidDeploy uses an Oracle, DB2, or MySQL database. And you can write your reports against that and have them displayed within the tool. We also have some plugins for things for comparison tools like JS-Difflib and Beyond Compare, so that you can do comparisons of your packages and comparisons of your snapshots directly through the tool. So that sort of gives you an overview of the framework. So the RapidDeploy capabilities, basically we can install and patch third-party tools such as WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, etc., etc. We can configuration manage all of the components that we are going to deploy, such that we can roll back, roll forward. We can deploy back to any point in time just by using the build package that we have, or rebuilding it from the CM tool and redeploying it. And as Helen alluded to earlier, people have even used this to go back for regulatory reasons, 7 years or something like that, in order to just completely rebuild those environments. We obviously support application deployment, so deploying EAR files, WAR files, bar files, .NET components, whatever they may be. We have a job scheduling and workflow component to enable you to schedule those deployments or put them into a workflow to say, well, deploy to development, then to test, then have a check before deploying to production. We have some environment visualization tools which enable you to look at what versions are deployed to what target environments. As I mentioned earlier, we can take snapshots of environments. We have templating capabilities to enable you to, if you don't even know WebLogic, for example, to just start up the WebLogic template, fill in some values, and it will create that target environment configuration for you. And also such things as physical discovery. And we've already been through the plugins, so this just gives an overview of who and what might want to use RapidDeploy. So developers are often going to work with RapidDeploy to create the initial configurations. Obviously their code is going to be stored in the SCM tool, but it's also now going to contain the configuration to deploy to all the target environments. Also, release engineers are likely to use this tool, and they might not even know anything about how to create or what any of the components in a package are, but they have the ability to deploy those packages through the environments and approve those. And again, testers and administrators, of course, can use RapidDeploy in a self-service manner, the testers, so they can just deploy their own test environments, deploy version code, so they could deploy version code 20, test it, then go back to 15, compare it with that, then go back forward to 20 again, go to 21, find that doesn't work, go back to 20. They can do all that themselves without having to speak to anybody or do anything themselves. And developers can use the tool to request changes to target environments. So normally developers wouldn't get involved in looking at anything but their own development environment, but this tool gives them then the ability to request changes. So say a heap size change because they've upgraded some code. They can request that to some development environments, and then they can request that that change gets percolated up through all of the test and live environments, and that goes through an approval process, and the change gets checked into the CM tool for each of the target environments that have been requested, and then it will get deployed as part of the normal release schedule. Okay, so this is just saying, I spoke about this earlier around continuous delivery. So this gives you the ability, so say for example from Jenkins, to build your code and then have it deployed automatically to your first smoke test environment, and then from there we can have numerous environments through our route to live to production, and we can have separate configurations for all of those environments where they're different. So what we tend to do is we'll have a common configuration that might go across all the environments, but then we can override that with differences for each target environment, and we put those in something we call a dictionary file. And that dictionary file really just is a set of name-value pairs in terms of what is different between environments. So for example, in a WebLogic environment, the only difference may be, for example, we need a larger heap size in production. And so the only thing that would be in that dictionary file for that particular environment would be the difference in heap size. And there's another dictionary file that would have all the common settings for all of the environments. And that means you can easily see what's different between your environments, because you have in one place, in one file, all of the differences between environments. Okay, so this is just now talking about the WebLogic plugin. The WebLogic plugin enables us to do a number of things in WebLogic, not all of which I'm going to show you today. So, firstly, you can deploy WebLogic binaries onto target servers. I'm not going to show you that today because we're probably not going to have time. And then subsequently you can patch those binaries also via RapidDeploy. And I'm not going to show you that either today. What I am going to show you are the components of the plugin inside the framework. So RapidDeploy is going to be running on a Windows server. We are going to create the binaries, or have the binaries already installed, and but it won't have any domain created. So what we're going to do is go through the process of how to define a domain. So we're going to create the model for that domain, and then what we're going to do is we're going to deploy that domain, and because that domain isn't there already, it will create it. Then we're going to, and it will also configure that environment with a EA file and a cluster or a server. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the configuration we've created. We're going to create a package, deploy that package to that environment. We're then going to take a snapshot of that environment. We're going to make some changes. We'll make one change to the EA file and one change to the configuration. We will create a new package. We will redeploy that package, and we will take a snapshot and we will compare. And in fact, what we're going to do is two different types of snapshot. We're going to do a package snapshot, which will compare the packages that we deploy towards the end of the demo, and we will compare an actual target snapshot of what actually got deployed. So, let's move on to the demonstration. Okay. So hopefully everybody can now see my screen. So I'm currently logged into RapidDeploy, although I expect it's timed out, and so I now need to log back in. RapidDeploy has fine-grained access control with users, groups, and roles. Those users, groups can be stored in the local RapidDeploy database. They may also be stored in LDAP. You can choose to store both the users and the groups in LDAP, or just the users in LDAP and keep the groups local. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is sort of explaining the fundamental part of RapidDeploy, is we are going to create a new project. And a project really, if you had it maps to an application development project in a lot of ways. So if you had a WebLogic project where you were creating the output of that project was an EA file, or more than one EA file, for example, then you would create one project for the WebLogic component for that project. Then they might have some other components like an HTTP server. That might be a different project. They might have some Oracle components where you want to keep the database up to date. That would be another project. So you'd have three projects from the basic project that your organization was running. We're just looking at one of those projects for that sort of more general project, and that is the WebLogic one. So I'm going to add a new project wizard. I'm going to give the project a name. I'm going to call it WebLogic_demo. And I'm going to also have a description. Now, this is a nice wizard to use. We have wizards, or you can just create these things manually, so to speak, through the web UI as well, but the wizard just guides you through. The project has an owner, which is one of the users. It's going to default to mvadmin. It's who I logged in as. This is a code deploy project. As I said earlier, we're not doing a binary install. We're doing a code deployment. We also have generic automation project and a discovery project. So I'm going to select an SCM tool. And these are my currently installed SCM plugins. This is not an exhaustive list of the plugins. It's only the ones that I have installed in my lib directory. Okay, and therefore are available to me. Now for this, I'm not going to use anything. I'm just going to use a file system. And I'm just going to store it in a temporary area. And that's where it's going to put all of my configuration files. And I'm now going to choose a artifact repository. So when we build any artifacts that can be deployed, where are we going to store those? Well, I'm going to store these in just some arbitrary location. But you can store it anywhere. And in fact, projects can share their storage locations if they're using file-based storage, or they can be separate. If they're sharing them, then you need to add a search string that will identify the package names from the other packages that are stored in the same place. But I could equally have chosen Maven, Nexus. There are others, but I haven't got them installed. All of these screens that we're looking at when we select these drop lists are actually coming from the plugin. And if you look on our website, you'll see that it's possible also to write your own plugins for RapidDeploy, and therefore you can have your own screens, your own tasks that run on the target. All of that is possible. It's an open API that you can use to create those, to create that plugin. Okay, so I could select build tools. I'm not going to bother with the build tool today. We won't be using it. And I'm going to select a product. And the product I'm going to use here, and these are the various product plugins I have installed at the moment, is a WebLogic 11 application server plugin. So, and I'm going to leave these as the default, except I'm going to change the control type to file. So all this really means is I can take snapshots which are file-based snapshots or JMX-based snapshots, and I can do deployments which are Python-based or JMX-based, and I'm going to use the file, which is the Python-based approach. And now, do I want to create the project directories and files automatically? Yes, I do. And I'm just going to create that project. And that's going to go off and create that. And if we look on my file system, I think we can show that. So I put it in C temp projects. And I have a lot of other projects in here, but there's the WebLogic demo. And if this was in Subversion, you'd be able to have a look in a Subversion local working copy. If it was ClearCase, it would have checked all of these into ClearCase. So it's created an orchestration file. We'll go into that in a minute. A log4j.properties, a j2e.config file, which has some files in it. So now what I'm going to do is let's have a look at that project and see what it's done. So we can always use a search function here to find the various projects that we want. So we had a look at, we created this WebLogic demo project. Quick look here. So we'll have all the various things that we set. We can also assign this project to groups. It's a member of the MV admin group, which is always assigned to every new project. So it's a group for administrators. And the other thing that's really important to look at here is the orchestration file. And this just has 3 tasks. An initialization task, a WebLogic initial domain creation task, and a finalization task. But we could select also by dragging and dropping any number of additional tasks from over here. And we have all kinds of tasks that we can use. And these are all available. And as well as writing plugins, you can also write tasks. And tasks are just discrete bits of work to carry out a function on a target server. So sleep, run a wget, run a halt, echo some message to the screen. Those are some very simple ones. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do now, so I don't have time to set this up, is I'm going to show you the project that we're actually going to use, which is one I created earlier. And that looks like this. It's very similar, actually, to the one that we've just created, but it has a few extra tasks in it. So you can see it's got the same 3 tasks, but it's got 3 more. So what we're going to do, before we actually deploy the EAR file, we're going to expand this EAR file, J2E examples web app war. We're going to do some search and replacement on it. And we're going to search for any file called index.html. And we're going to use the search and replace values in any properties file that we find that matches this, any environment that we're deploying to. And then we're going to EAR that file back up. And then we're going to run the WebLogic initial domain creation and create or update the domain with all the details that we decide to configure. Now, but how do we do that if we don't know very much about WebLogic? Well, we can go to our configuration panel. Now here I'm going to select that WebLogic demo just to show you how to do this project. Now, we have one environment. I'm going to just delete that and create a new one. Okay, so this is just telling me that all of those have been deleted. I'm going to create a new environment. I'm going to choose a server, and we'll go into server in a minute. That's the target that we're actually, the node that we're deploying to. We need a WebLogic environment, and this is a logical name for the domain that we're going to deploy to. We need an instance name, and that's WebLogic instance 01_file. We're going to do this. And this is a logical name for the standalone managed server or the cluster that we're going to deploy to. And we can have an application name, and I'm just going to call that from scratch. I could just create this, and it would create me a bunch of empty files. But I don't want to do that. I actually want to use a template. So since we have the WebLogic 11 plugin installed, I find that I have a template for that. And this template enables me to do a number of things. Firstly, it enables me to create the orchestration file, and we just looked at the orchestration file, which has the tasks in it of what we were going to run, and this gets you started really. You can add other tasks to this orchestration file later, but this just gets you started with some default orchestrations that you could use to get you going. So we're just going to say domain only. So where am I going to put where is the working directory where the files are going to get copied to on the target server? I'm just going to put them here. What's the WebLogic root directory? I'm going to just amend that because it's not quite the same. So by default, these values are filled in with the common values, and your site can change these to be whichever defaults you want people to see when they use the template, but we supply them with the defaults already, and these are the ones that come out of the box. So then there are some more questions here about different settings. I've got a name for the domain, where the domain root is, the admin server. I'm just going to change this to localhost. An upload directory, I'll call that upload. I can change the protocol to be SSL or not. Well, I'm not going to bother in this case. If it's SSL, there are a number of things that you can configure, which I'm not going to. I'm going to configure a node manager machine. You can configure one or more of these things. I'm going to configure a clustered managed server. With some settings, and that will be that. I'm going to give it a root directory. I'm not going to configure any key stores or anything. I'm going to configure a cluster with multicasting. I will configure a file store, a JDBC store. I'm going to configure some JDBC resources, JMS system resources, and a deployable application result, which is our examples web app, which I will need to put into the target location. I have one already set up with that, and that's what I'll use. I can also create deployment plans, also shared libraries. There are other things I can also do, and the customer can add additional things into this list if they wish to. Basically, you can configure anything in WebLogic that you want to configure. When I do create, this is going to create a number of files. Okay, and we can see those here, and we can go and look at them. And you'll see that all of those things that I filled in that template, I've now become dictionary items. Some of them are empty because I didn't fill them in. And basically this dictionary defines everything about this environment that makes this environment what it is. And what that means is that all I need to do to create multiple downstream environments from this environment, once I've tested it, is really to go onto our clone page and change these dictionary items. Once I've done that, I can create any number of environments and clone those environments from this environment, either into the same WebLogic domain or into different WebLogic domains. Doesn't matter. So I can add properties, I can edit properties. It's worth looking at that, in fact, because you can see that I can add and change a property. I can use different escape values because I know that I might, if it's XML or HTML, I might need it to be escaped properly I'm sure everybody's had problems with that kind of thing when they've been configuring files. I can encrypt it, yes or no, and I can save it as a password. If it's encrypted on the file system. It's only ever decrypted on the target when it's run. And if it's saved as a password, it means the value is not shown here. It's masked, so nobody can see it. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. Just going to go down to the bottom, cancel out of here. Oh, we've got the full pages, but you can also specify different sort of page counts so that you can see different number of pages, and here you can see the pages here. You can do this with all of our menus, pretty much. So the next thing is we can look at the text search replace, and this was what we would use to do search replace. We haven't got any defined in this environment, and I'm going to show you a different environment where they are defined. We can also look at the resources on the target server. And so if I was running this from my client and my target server was some, RapidDeploy server on a Linux box, you can always have a look at these files. And if you have permissions, you can actually go ahead and change these. This is the actual XML orchestration file, which you don't typically manually change, but you can if you wish to. Okay, so we've done that. Now, let's create a package and deploy it. So here, normally you would create packages out of your build tool, so Jenkins or Cruise Control or Anthill Pro or whatever. But today, for the purposes of this demo, we are actually going to create a package through the RapidDeploy tool. And all this does really is it zips up the root location in your SCM tool to create a package, and you give it a name. Okay, so if we go down to our WebLogic from scratch, then we'll see that we don't have any packages. So I'm going to add a package. Now the first package I create, I have to give it a name. Subsequently, it'll just append, and we'll see that in a minute, a number. It will give you a search string that you should add for the name, and I'm going to call that 001. The reason it doesn't actually fill it in there is because you might put the number before or after or anywhere, so it wants to wait until you've decided what name to give it, or where that name, that search string should appear in the name. So I'm going to just skip to finish here. Basically, I can choose things like the type of archive, is it jar, zip, or whatever. I can choose a different archive route, and I can add additional resources into the package if I wish to. So I'm going to create that package. Okay, now we can just look at that package and make sure that it's as we expect. We've got some checksums here, which we can use later on. We've got the description, which has been put into the manifest, etc. So now we've created our target environment. So we have a WebLogic domain at the moment, which is empty, and on my file system, it's stored here in WebLogic, BEA, and then in domains. Well, it's going to create a my generic domain in there. So from here, we can basically navigate to do a deployment. And I'm showing you the slow way of doing it, but there is a quick way of doing this. So we select the project. It's automatically selected the server environment, instance, and application because there is only one. But of course, we may, over time, have many, many of these that we can deploy this package to. Lots of different domains in our route to live. I can also, in theory, select additional projects here and different packages, so I could choose any other package that I wanted, and I could add these over here, and then I could create a deployment plan of lots of different projects to run, or lots of different targets from the same project to run at the same time. So I could add, scripts in here, I could add scripts from here, and that's fine. I can do any of those things. And then delete them, can move them up or down. Okay, so here now I can select the version or that package that I want to deploy. Now we only have one, that's the one we just created. Here I've got many, and I can just choose 52. Now I can here choose latest configuration. That'll just inject some late configuration from the SCM tool into the package if we wish to do that. I'm not going to go into that. Now this is saying, okay, there are some properties, some dictionary items that don't have values. Now you may want to do that because you may not want to put things like database passwords in, even if they're encrypted. You may want to always put them as a late config. And this forces me to check all of those values that don't have, all of those keys that don't have a value, and I'm just going to accept, yes, I accept that they're empty, but it will force me to accept that. And now I can go on. Now here I can say, okay, well I want to make Hello World dependent on WebLogic from scratch. So Hello World will only deploy if WebLogic 10 from scratch is successful. Here I can configure some manual executions. So do I want somebody to have to log in and check before, well, after WebLogic 10 from scratch is finished, but before Hello World deploys, to go, yes, I want to continue, or no. So this allows me to put a little bit of workflow in the actual deployment plan, although this isn't the full workflow that we have end-to-end. This is just for within a plan. And I can also configure these to deploy at a particular time. You know, I can say daily, whatever I want to do, and I can give an ends on. So basically it's a bit like, you know, being able to configure cron or something. I can now take a comparison or snapshot. I can't do that at the moment because I only have one package. I'll show you that next time. So I basically could compare this package with a previous package to see what's going to be deployed. Right, and now I can execute this request. So I'm going to execute that. So this deployment is now going. We can follow the progress. So actually, I think we can probably leave this now, and we can go and amend the properties files for the next deployment. So let's go back to resources, configuration, edit, promote. We will select our from scratch project again. What we're going to do now is just go and make some changes to this project, to this environment. So I'm going to edit this environment, and I'm going to change a data dictionary item value, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the JVM argument. It's the classic thing to change. So I'm going to change it from 100 meg maximum heap to 128 meg. I don't want to overdo it because I'm running this on my laptop, and I don't want to blow my laptop memory. So we'll save that, and then I'm going to go to Properties, Text Search Replace Properties, and so here at the moment it's just going to say Hello is currently being replaced with Hello from the WebLogic server, and I'm going to change that to say Hello webcast audience from the WebLogic server. Let's just make sure that's set. Okay, and I'm going to save those changes. Okay. So now what we can do is go and create another package. And actually, so this package is now going to have those new configuration files in. So we've got the old package, we can always go back to that, but we're just going to add a new one. And now, as you can see, it's just automatically updated that with O2. And you can change that, just create that package. And then I can just click on here and then immediately go and deploy that. But let's just go and see how our job is going. Sorry, I meant to go to executing jobs. So the jobs have all finished. We can see that we had the Hello World job ran successfully and the WebLogic from scratch. We can go ahead and view the log file from that. and we can see that that actually did finish. You can go back and review these logs. There are some that you will see some things that are errors in these logs, and it's just when it can't go online, so it then has to start the server. So what we can do now in theory is we can go into WebLogic, which is now running, which wasn't running before. I couldn't load the page. We can start the server that we've created. If we go and look on the command line in that domain, we now see we've got my generic domain there. Everything is in there, including the servers that we've created. Right. Okay, so I was on the shutdown page, so I just need to go back to here. Sometimes WebLogic is a little bit slow to go into when it's running on my laptop, so just bear with me. We will get there. Okay, so here we have our server that we've created as well. So we're going to start that server. And that should be saying, hello from the WebLogic server, hopefully, when it's running. So whilst that's starting up, what we can now do is go and take a snapshot of that target server. So here we've got resources, targets, servers, and environments. Now, the server is the node that we did the deployment to, which is localhost, and the environment was the WebLogic environment 01, which we have down here. So what we can do, and we're going to go and look at this, is we can actually take a snapshot, and if we go onto the project tab, we can see that we're selecting a file-based snapshot against that target server, and these are the files that we're going to snapshot. And they're a bit grayed out, hopefully you can see them, because I'm in view mode, not read mode, not edit mode. So I'm going to go back on the general tab. I have some other options I can do here if I'm an operator. I can stop, start, restart that environment. I can get the status of it. But what I'm going to do now is take a snapshot. Now, a snapshot is also a deployment request, a job. So we can look at executing jobs, and we can see that we actually have a snapshot running here. And again, you can look at the logs and follow the logs in real time. Though I guess that snapshot will be relatively quick. Okay, so let's now see if we can load the examples web app. And here we are, hello from the WebLogic server. So we've deployed a domain, clustered managed server, an application with all of its configuration, and we're able to see hello from the server. So what we're going to do now is, well, we've made some changes to that server. We've changed the message, and we've changed the heap size. So let's go back and run another job. We're going to do the from scratch one again. I won't bother doing the hello world one this time. That was really just to show you that you can deploy multiple different projects together that can be related or not. So now I have two possibilities. It's automatically selected the O2, but I can select the O1. Obviously, if I deploy O1, it won't do anything, but O2. So I'm now going to hit skip to finish because I don't need to go through all of those other pieces. And next, but I imagine it's also going to now tell me again, yeah, there are late configs to be configured. I'm just going to accept again that I don't need to configure them. I'm going to skip to finish. And now I'm going to execute that request. Okay, so we'll let that job run. So what I can show you now is the comparing packages. Now we could have done this just before we did the deployment, but I'm going to do it now so that we can let that deployment go, show you how to do it. So So if we go to WebLogic 10 from scratch now, we've got two packages that we can deploy. We have, in fact, deployed 01, and we're currently deploying 02. So let's just see what's different between them. Now, I've got 3 comparison tools installed. I'm going to use the Beyond Compare one. In fact, I'm going to use Beyond Compare 2, so I prefer it to Beyond Compare 3. And we start the comparison. And I'm going to compare on size and CRC. So we're just looking at what's changed. Retain expanded archive is different. There's a configuration item that's different. We've increased the heap size to 128. We can see that quite clearly. And okay, we've changed the hello from the WebLogic server to hello webcast audience from the WebLogic server. So those are the things that we've changed. So that's quite a useful thing to be able to do. You can also see that the meta-inf manifest has changed. The version has changed from 001 to 002. Did we check this? Okay, so change the expanded archive. So let's see how that deployment's getting on. Okay, so it's finished. We can look at previous jobs if we like. We can always look at these previous jobs, and we can see that also the snapshot is finished that we took. You can see that's an environment snapshot. Okay, so, and as you can see, that now says hello webcast audience from the WebLogic server. So it's still, the application is running, and we've changed that. If we go and have a look at the clustered managed server, we should see, when it lets me log in, that the heap size has changed. Again, my WebLogic is a little slow. Okay. So if we go over to, I'm not sure, that's clustered managed server. So we go over to server start, and we can see the heap size is now 128. So there we've displayed creating a new environment, deploying first to it, making a change, deploying something else. We could deploy the old package back, and it would just put it back to the way it was. And you can see how powerful this is if we build this up with Oracle databases and HTTP servers and so on and so forth. We can just create environments, just remove them, create them again, do whatever we like. And we can also clone them very simply. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take another snapshot of that environment, select the same environment again. So WebLogic environment 01. I'm just going to take another snapshot. Okay, and while that snapshot's running, I can show you, if I go to Configuration, Edit, Promote, and I select that. Oops. If I then wanted to create another environment, all I have to do now is say, clone that logical environment. I give it a different name. I'm not going to bother actually, or I could put it in on a different server, or a different domain, or the same domain but a different application logical name. So I could call that 05, for example. So this is just create a new cluster. I can actually use this to seed a new project if I wish. And then I can just change the data dictionary items that make this environment different from the previous one. And then I can go next, and I can create this environment. I'm not going to bother doing that. You get the idea. Okay, so hopefully our snapshot is finished. Let's just look at executing jobs. That's it. So now what I can do is go to our snapshot project that I've created for this. That's the project. So, in fact, I'm doing this in the wrong place, pardon me. I need to go to software management. So there's the WebLogic snapshot. So we've got the two snapshots that we took, the one after the first deployment and the one after the second deployment. You can also schedule snapshots to happen daily or whatever you want, and those snapshots will be saved so that you can do comparisons later on. And in the next release, it will email you the differences if you wish to be emailed the differences, and you'll be able to put a filter in to say only show me these differences, and then whenever the environment changes, you'll know and get an email with those differences. So I'm going to compare these two snapshots with the same plugin. And I'm going to, again, not bother with comparing timestamps because I know they'll be different. I'll do it on size and CRC. So if we look in this domain, we can see there are some differences. Mostly they won't be very much. We can look at the file. This file's got a different encrypted password. I'd expect that. There'll be something similar in here, I suspect. Yeah. But the main difference will probably be in the config XML. If we go and look at the config XML, we can see, indeed, the heap size has changed to 128. So we can always keep an eye on our differences. So that really shows you how the tool works. I can quickly go into some other useful features. I'll go through just a couple. One is the plugin manager. So with RapidDeploy, I don't know if you've ever used Jenkins or any of those tools, you can download and install plugins into the tool. It's the same with RapidDeploy. You can basically see which plugins you've got installed, have a look at the available plugins, and search on plugins, and pretty much just click a button and those plugins will be installed. This is very useful. When you want to upgrade to different versions, you can see there are a lot of different versions that you can choose. And there's a recommendation as to whether your version of RapidDeploy is suitable for that version. So all of these are suitable. So that's one nice feature of the tool. But if you don't have internet access through RapidDeploy, you can also use the upload plugin button. So you can log into our site, download the plugin to your desktop, and then upload it. If you want to do that, you have to have a certain role and privilege. So we can have a look at those. So if we go and have a look at user management groups, then we choose a particular group. I'm just choosing one at random here, obviously whether it's enabled. A group can have a number of roles, and all the members of that group, the users, will have those roles on the projects that are also a member of the group. So you could put all of your internet banking program projects into the group, and then you could add a couple of users to the group. So that's just got one user, and it's got one project, but you could add multiple users and multiple projects, and make all of those project administrators. Or you could also give it a global role, which would apply to any, this group then would apply to any project. And these are all of the various roles that are supported in RapidDeploy. So we have administrator, security administrator. We have the release manager, test manager, and development manager. So if an environment is production, then you must be a release manager to be able to deploy to it. Same for test, same for development. Whether you can administer environment files. There's also the ability to request changes to environment files but not actually make them. They need to be approved by the environment administrator. Then again, you have some of the similar roles on the project side. Can I do a build job? Can I do a binary job? An application job? Can I create packages? Those kinds of things. Can I run reports? Am I an operator? Can I stop and start and take snapshots? So on and so forth. So we are expanding these roles all of the time. So later, next release, we'll have more roles that are available, more fine-grained. And that is the end of the demo.
Okay. We just recap on what we showed in the demo, if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's fine with me, Helen. So what we've seen is RapidDeploy running on a Windows server, but it can equally run on Unix or Linux, AIX, any of those flavors. We've seen having an empty WebLogic domain, having an empty WebLogic binaries on the target server, creating a domain and then deploying clusters and applications to it. So with the configuration, so we've effectively configured an entirely new environment that works from scratch. We didn't show the deploying the binaries, but that's a relatively trivial task in RapidDeploy in comparison with what we have shown you, and is very simple to configure. We have packaged the environment and deployed to it. We have taken a snapshot of that environment after we've created it. We have made changes to some of the configuration files that we use to make the initial deployment. We have then updated and created a new package to reflect those changes. We've redeployed that new package. We've compared that package with the previous package to see what we thought would change when we did the deployment. We've then redeployed. We've then retaken a snapshot of the target environment and compared that snapshot with the one we took earlier so that we could see what actually did change. So we've compared what we thought would change, and then after the deployment happened, what actually did change.
Thanks, Richard. That brings us very nearly to the end of today's session. Lots of our prospects and customers like to get their hands dirty with the tool and have a proper go in their own environments with it. Richard and his team made a version a couple of years ago of RapidDeploy that has an integrated hypersonic database, which makes it very easy to download and install in your own environment and trial it against your own use cases and your own targets. So if you are interested in getting your hands on the trial, please email me. You can see my email address on the screen at the moment, and we'll get that over to you. So all that remains now is for us to thank you very much for your time and say goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.